I'm Safi.
And I'm Mystic.
And this is mini episode number 2 for Lore Together.
Yes, this is going out to our patrons early, as all mini episodes will.
Yay! Thank you, patrons!
If you would like to get this early as well, or check out our other stuff on our Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/loretogether. You can also contact us on Twitter at loretogether or through email at loretogether@gmail.com. The spiel is over now.
The spiel is over now.
Episode 2.
Episode 2,
You're in
Electric
the hot
Boogaloo. Yes. Well, yeah, so I actually kind of had to beg Mystic to do this one because this is actually something I've been thinking about for years before this happened. So, of course, since Safi is taking the stage, you guys probably could have guessed that this is related to Dragon Age. Yay, Dragon Age! Which is coming out with Game 4 at some point in the future. BioWare at least has it confirmed that they're working on it.
I would appreciate BioWare doing a when it's done, much like CD Projekt Red does, as opposed to it'll be out next year, and we've only worked on it for 5 months so far.
Well, that's an EA problem, I think, more than anything else, to be perfectly honest.
I'm hoping EA eventually realizes they can't keep doing that with giant RPGs.
I hope that most publishers realize they can't do that with giant games of any genre whatsoever, because I'm also thinking about,
Oh, like No Man's Sky.
Fallout 76.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a...
Fallout 76 had a lot of decent ideas, just rushed. Seems to be the problem.
Yeah, so... But one of the things that whenever a game's coming out with as much storytelling and world deep diving that you can do as Dragon Age is that there's a lot of theories that happen. And I wanted to share one of the theories that I have. So first of all, we should do a spoilers warning for a couple of different things. So spoilers for not only Dragon Age Inquisition itself, which slight spoilers for that, but also definite spoilers for the DLCs called The Descent and Trespasser. So, all right, Mystic's groaning, but we'll get into that later.
I'm groaning because Trespasser is just kind of this convoluted thing.
It's not convoluted. It actually, I think, the more I think about it, the smarter I think that it was in certain ways. I just wish that they alluded to it more in the main game.
Oh, you mean have the actual bad guy be...
We'll get into that because I think it could have been a mystery that could have been solved and then leave it as a cliffhanger at the end of Inquisition rather than the way they did it, which it was like, surprise, it's actually a different antagonist.
Right.
So they could have written it a little better. Also, spoilers because I run a one-shot that the whole premise of it is this theory that I'm about to spout. So...
We are also doing spoilers for Dragon Age 4, kinda? Like, we don't know what's in it, but we know that some things are concretely in it.
It's a theory.
They have said...
This is when I do the what is it, the mat pad. It's a theory.
It's just a theory.
It's just a theory, a game theory, yeah.
Certain themes that are going to be in it, though, already.
Yes, because some of that has been confirmed
spoilers
right now.
Because there is some confirmed details that we'll be talking about, I'm sure.
Right. But those are going to be light spoilers because this is all theorizing. Whereas this is hard spoilers for specifically the DLC called Descent and Trespasser, as well as this one shot that I occasionally run at like Gen Con and other conventions. And I'll get more into what that is because that one shot actually is essentially how I dealt with this theory rumbling in my head a few years back. So...
Well, let's get into it then, because this is a mini episode.
Right. So one of the most intriguing things about the lore in Dragon Age is actually how deep the history goes. It's a little annoying that it suggested there's something interesting and pivotal about humanity, but at least humans aren't touted as the most lore important of people in the same way other franchises have done so in the past. Like Mass Effect, humans were extra special. But I will say, at least when it comes to Dragon Age, yes, something is strange about humans, but there's also really strange stuff about dwarves, about elves, about the Qunari in particular, or the Kosith as they were called before they were the Qunari. However, what's more intriguing is the centuries-long history before humanity even showed up. A lot of that history is expanded into 2 DLCs that we're talking about that are part of Inquisition, the Trespasser and the Descent.
And I have played both of these.
Yes.
I don't remember much of either anymore.
Okay, get the memberries ready. So let's touch on the Descent first, which was released August 11th of 2015. The story takes place in the deep Lyrium mines under the Storm Coast. The Inquisitor is asked to aid the investigation into the source of earthquakes that are affecting mining operations. The Inquisitor, along with their selected companions, a member of the Legion of the Dead named Ren, and a shaper named Volta, go on a mission to find out what actually is happening. It is Volta who first theorizes that a Titan may be the source of the earthquakes. At this point, Titans are a theory of ancient beings that live deep underground, and some dwarves consider them a mere myth or a children's tale. I think if I remember correctly, Volta mentions the theory of the Titans, and Ren, who's a good friend of hers because they've worked together recently, basically kind of admonishes her like in a friendly way for considering the theory. There's a lot of awesome dwarven lore in this game in particular.
Yeah, I remember there being a lot in Descent, particularly. I think I got
Yes.
overwhelmed by the amount of lore dump there was.
It's a huge, I mean, that's part of the reason I kept going because there's just so much. There's a point where you're like, oh, I must be near the end. And then that's when all the dwarven lore just starts like spilling all over the place. That includes the Shah Bratal, who are a group of dwarves who actually drink lyrium. By the end of an arduous journey deep underground, losing Ren in the process, you find yourself in the center of a huge cave with copious veins of lyrium. And there's these dwarven structures built around it. And actually in the center of it is a big, hard piece of lyrium. Volta is confused. Where is the Titan? Is the Titan in this huge cave? It turns out, no, you've actually entered the Titan. So,
right.
And this
So
is
the lyrium is kind of like the heart.
lyrium is Titan blood.
Okay.
Specifically. And it puts the use of lyrium in a whole new perspective. Just to go on a very quick side tangent, for me, it philosophically changes how you see a good chunk of the magical world. Mages have an innate ability to use magic, but is enhanced by lyrium. Many mages are taught to avoid blood magic, which is the other way that you can enhance your magical capabilities.
But of course, lyrium is blood.
Yes.
So
Almost any powerful magic is technically always blood magic now.
So my question then is, okay, that's interesting actually. But my question is the lyrium like regular blood? Like, what is a Titan? Is it a living thing? Is it like a giant machination that is powered by lyrium? Like,
It is considered an organic being within Thetis that actually they are so large that's why they are basically pieces of the world, the earth
Okay.
of Thetis.
now, if you, I just want to do one thing. If you're a little lost at this point because we're jumping into Dragon Age, you may want to go check out our episode 12, which was all about the life of King Merrick in Dragon Age, and we kind of give a brief explanation of the world there.
Yeah,
So if you want a refresher or more info, go check out that episode.
right. So enough of the aside about what this now means. We got to talk about how this links into the lore introduced in Trespasser, which came out September 8th, 2015. So it was kind of a quick succession between the two. For any longtime fan, this DLC is understood as a true ending of the game. As much as the Battle of Corypheus is the focus of the main game, this DLC answers a lot of the questions left after that story.
I really don't like when they do stuff like that.
You don't like it because you feel like it's a cash grab, but I think there was a way to write this where it wouldn't have been wouldn't have felt as that way.
I don't think it's a cash grab. I think there should, if that is your actual story from the start, which ideally it should have been.
I think it honestly was too.
There should be more than just the one hint that we got of it.
Corypheus should have been written better.
Yes.
And then we would have felt better about him being the bad guy for Inquisition.
Right.
To have something that essentially disproves Andrastian beliefs as big as Corypheus, somebody who holds up the Inquisitor and says, I've seen the throne of the Maker and it stands empty, and to essentially not build up on that is a whole nother mini episode. So
Missed opportunities of writing. That'll be a fun one.
yeah. Again, Trespasser touches more on like what are the hanging chads per se of the end of the base game. I won't go into every single point that's touched upon in DLC, but if you haven't played it before and you have Inquisition, yes, play it. If you have to choose between the other two DLCs and this one, I would still choose this one. This one is pretty much the hard end of the game, which will lead you into Dragon Age 4 and get you hyped up for it.
I would agree actually with that. When it comes to certain DLCs, if you want the actual end of the game,
Yeah,
like that is more important than lore dump ones.
right.
Lore dump ones are for people who want to expand the world.
Yeah.
The one that explains the end of the game or expands upon the end of the game
Yes.
towards the next game, that should be the important one.
Yeah. And this is a bit of a lore dump, but it also helps set up a lot of the tension that we're
It
going to
does.
have to answer in Dragon Age 4. Or at least, I don't think BioWare will drop the ball on this writing this time around, but we'll see because capitalism.
Yeah, I think they realize at this point it might be make or break for them
I hope
after
so.
Anthem.
I hope so.
That said, it has been make or break for them since Mass Effect 1 came out
Right.
and Dragon Age 2 came out and then Inquisition. Like, they keep having missteps and then really good games.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Like, Dragon Age 2 is a misstep in some ways.
A lot of ways.
In a lot of ways. Good characters, good setting up stuff.
Oh, gosh. And there's some codex entries that you're like, why didn't they focus more on this?
Right. A lot of missed
Angle.
opportunities. Terrible, terrible twist in the third act.
If you want
But-
to talk about disappointing
Right.
bosses.
But they
yeah.
go from Origins, which I don't like Origins that much.
If I had to choose between Origins and Inquisition, I would choose Inquisition as much as Origins has a much broader story to tell.
Yes. Ideally, it would be best of both worlds,
Yeah.
which I think they tried to do with Inquisition because
They
it's
did.
not open world. You're still picking locations from a map and stuff.
Right.
But I think the locations you go to are too expansive.
They can be.
At times, especially that one desert place that the only reason you're there is to collect shards.
I'm going to choke somebody thinking about that. Like, don't even tell me that.
BioWare has this problem of going ups and downs and ups and downs. They also have a problem of putting middle, like between game DLCs
Yeah.
that explain set up the next game.
Right.
They did that between Mass Effect 2 and 3. They did it between
Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, they
Dragon
did
Age
that
2
too.
and Inquisition, which I've never played. That's the one with that's Warden's Keep, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, never played it.
That's literally explains where Corypheus comes from.
I believe Origins had a DLC between
There was
a Morgan DLC
Yes.
that
Witch
was
Hunt.
between Origins and 2.
Yes.
And it's just like, fine, but give me some more to work with.
Well, I think there are higher powers that decide how certain things are released
Or-
and written.
Make them easier to find.
Now you're talking about business decisions. It has nothing to do with this podcast.
Sorry,
You've gone on
I'll cut all that out.
on a bit of a tangent there.
This is a mini episode. I keep forgetting.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest revelations in Trespasser is the origin of the elven gods. Up to this point, most diehard fans know the mythos of the elven gods, which is they were tricked into being locked away by Fen'Haral, the Dread Wolf, who is described as a trickster god. The elves are now abandoned, and some of them even blame this for their plight. Elves are actually probably the most downtrodden race on Thetis when you encounter them. And they're pretty much kind of like this. I don't want to say that they're a perfect allegory for certain minority populations, but if you wanted to compare them to like aboriginals in certain parts of the world, I would say there's a lot of similarities. So the elves are now abandoned, and some of them even blame this for their plight and why they're one of the most downtrodden races on Thetis. With the help of some weird alluvian, which is a magical elven mirror pathways,
It's like a mirror portal thing, right?
it is a mirror portal. So an alluvian is a mirror portal, and during this mission, essentially, that you're on, which is 2 years after you did everything in Inquisition, you go through these alluvians, and there's these pathways and these other alternate dimensions that you travel through.
They are alternate dimensions.
Kind of, sort of, yeah, magically
I thought it was just
established.
like
alternate
all
areas.
portals lead to this area, and you can just travel fast.
There's a crossroads which you see in Inquisition, but it's suggested that what you're crossing through in parts of Trespasser aren't quite that, or were established in different ways, or could be established in different ways.
Because space is kind of messed up in there. Isn't there like you're walking upside down, quote unquote?
Yeah,
Okay. It's like
it's
an MC Escher painting.
well, in certain parts it is. And also, one of the things that's specific is it seems very dead and dusty and abandoned to other races, but if you play an Inquisitor that's an elf, it's actually still kind of alive and like somewhat well maintained.
Wait,
So,
what?
yeah, elves have a very different perception of those pathways than humans or dwarves or Canary would.
I have to play Inquisition again now.
Yeah, well, just that part.
I
It's
don't
not.
have
It's
I don't
it's
have an Elven Inquisitor, so
it's a subtle difference, but there is a difference. And it's also in one of the books that you will probably touch upon some other day, years from now. They touch upon the fact that if you're a human around an Oblivion, it feels really alien, whereas if you're an elf, it just feels kind of natural. Like, yeah, this is something I should be using. So through these pathways, there's certain facts and little codex entries you find, and then finally at the end of Trespasser, you get confirmation from Solus, who is also known as everyone's favorite egg. You kind of discover the truth of the elven gods. They also go by the term the Evanuris, which turns out is the proper term because they're not actually gods. Instead, they were powerful mages eons ago, it's suggested, who helped lead battles in war and became respected elders. First, they were heroes, but then became tyrants who enslaved their fellow elves and hoarded their power. For those of you who remember in your Inquisition, when Solus revealed to the love interest Inquisitor that
that will
her
never happen for me.
the Valicine on her face is actually a slave marking. And you can decide whether or not you want to keep that slave marking or not. And he'll help erase the tattoo on your face if you want to. Solus at the end of Trespasser reveals that he was actually the Dread Wolf, Fen'Harel, and it was the name that was given to him as an insult. So he actually is the one who changed the world so the Evanuris would be locked away and would not hurt the people, the elves, anymore. Essentially, the way the player has understood the fundamentals of magic on Thedas was established thanks to Solus imprisoning the Evanuris. Solus created the Veil. The Veil is the reason why you can't just have magic because you live in the world. It used to be that accessible, and certain people mastered it, and that's why they were the Evanuris. The Veil,
yeah.
the Veil is what keeps the Fade separate from the real world.
And that's what's breached in Inquisition.
Yes.
Okay.
And that veil is, Solus believes, is the reason why elves no longer retain the power they used to have, and they're now downtrodden and looked down upon and lost their way in his mind.
Okay, I'm getting a whole new appreciation for Inquisition because
Yes.
I didn't connect all of that even.
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked the elven lore the elves are kind of my favorite. And when it comes to the races there in the sense of how they're developed and just Solus's additional information to the player has made it even that much more exciting and intriguing to me. So with that information in mind, you can, looking back on codex entries, the Inquisitor can read while traveling through the ancient alluvions, you can discover that Mythal is credited for taking down the quote-unquote pillars of Earth. This is a reference to the Titans. If the Inquisitor has already done the DLC The Descent, they will interpret what they found in this codex entry as referring to the Evanuris mining the Titans' bodies for Lyrium. So with all that information, we have now connected how the Descent is initially linked to Trespasser and how the Evanuris basically became tyrannical and took what they wanted from the dwarves with force. It's essentially suggested that Mythal gifted this extra land that used to be to the dwarves, for the dwarves, I should say, and she gifted it to other elves. That's what's suggested. Again, with these two DLC stories, we are fundamentally changing how a player of Dragon Age series understands the world. Gods are just selfish mages, and Titans are the source of all Lyrium with dwarves guarding them underground. And the elves, who are the most downtrodden of people on what we know of Thetis, were actually condemned by a man who was trying to save them. Knowing all of this, one thing really bothered me. Solus mentioned that Mythal had been betrayed by the other Evanuris in the pursuit of power, yet you have this reference to Mythal helping to topple the pillars of Earth. But did she really? In certain publications and story beats in the game, BioWare has suggested that the history of Thetis is subjective due to the way history is recorded. Think back.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
That's like sounds like Elder Scrolls.
and I think the way they do it is extremely intentional. Think back to the rumors of King Calenhad when we spoke about King Merrick and the stories of him drinking the dragon's blood from different sources. The Witch of the Wilds, Vanya, one of the daughters of Flemeth, she confirmed it in a very different way than what the Canary suspected. So the Canary had that rumor, and then Vanya kind of confirmed it, but they're getting it from two different sources entirely. Other fans can reference the different interpretations of the teachings of the Chantry, the differing attitudes between demons and or spirits, the conflicting information about blood magic, and many more cultural issues throughout the series. One of the ones I want to quickly mention is there are two different books of Thetis. World of Thetis Volume 1, World of Thetis Volume 2. World of Thetis Volume 1 will give you the very Chantry-approved rendition of where Andraste got her power, which is the Maker.
Mm-hmm.
In World of Thetis Volume 2, you get the more nuanced idea of what happened with Andraste, which includes stories of having a sibling that got very sick, stories of hearing voices around a certain time period, and kind of alluding that what she believed was the Maker may not actually been the Maker. And to me, when I first read what was in World of Thetis Volume 2, talking about the Andrastian history, it sounded like it was alluding to the fact that she was just hearing things in her head. Like it wasn't even magical.
That makes sense.
There are other theories that, people think she's linked to certain other old gods that are the ones that, the Grey Wardens are fighting, blah, 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 blah. But you could also just write it off as she was Looney Tunes and people listened to her.
Maybe she was Lyrium addled.
Or Lyrium.
What if Sandal is the next savior?
I mean, I would believe it. I'm not even going to...
Enchantment. Sorry.
With the differing perspectives in mind, I wondered to myself if the perception of what Mythal did was wrong. I wanted to share my theory, which I actually reveal in a high-level one-shot I run a few times called A Meeting of Air and Earth. And Mystic, you actually played this, but at Gen Con. At Gen Con, yeah. So it was
we didn't get very far, if I remember correctly.
I write more than what any table would be able to finish, merely so that way it's...
Apologies, we had to cut. We had a crying baby.
Yes. So we were talking about you didn't realize that you had played this one shot at Gen Con.
I remember now. Okay. I remember we didn't get very far.
So, well, and again, I was explaining that I run a one shot in a way where that there isn't one pathway. So, and especially this one, there's multiple pathways that lead to different things that were suggested at the end of Trespasser. This one shot is run with the Dragon Age rules written by Green Ronin Publishing. I actually had the honor to run this with one of the writers from the Faces of Thetis book at Gen Con. Faces of Thetis is an additional supplemental book for that rule set. She was great, as are all the people who write for Green Ronin, in my humble opinion, but I could go on forever about that. The premise of this one-shot is an investigation of an alluvion that was found by an Inquisition scout, and it turns out it is to a strange space similar to the pathways found in a Trespasser DLC. Through a lot of investigation, the players realize that the alluvion has led to a meeting place one has actually established for the Evanuris to meet up with the Titans, which I think you at least got that far. Because
I do not remember.
So
it was a couple years ago in my defense.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago when Mystic played this, everybody else was playing an elf, but there was one guy who was playing a dwarf. And remember, he didn't see things the same way you guys saw.
Right, I remember that part.
And there was a lot of magic, and then it turned out this meeting place that had different levels and had suggestions of other clues and suggestions of who was staying where. was not only connected to this meeting place to the Illuvians, but then also connected to a dwarven Tig area. And
Vaguely. Yeah, okay.
yeah, and you found this cave and you found these notes suggesting a murder of some sorts that the dwarves accused the elves
Don't remember that
of.
part.
Okay.
So,
You guys did find that though. So the most astute have only been able to figure out that the whole place was established originally by Mythal, and this was the place where Mythal had been betrayed by the other Evanuris, which is something that Solus talks about specifically.
okay.
So, about her being betrayed, at least. He doesn't explain how. So, I
I
think,
mean,
yeah.
the whole thing of Mythal is actually in a cutscene at the end of Trespasser?
It's not the whole thing. It's a hint as to what's to
Right.
come. Solus, it suggested that Solus takes a wisp of her power. And it suggested that she was incapacitated by that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember that scene and being just like, what?
So,
But again, I hadn't made my connections then. So.
yeah. I think the reason why the Evanuris betrayed Mythal is because she was not trying to attack the Titans, but trying to barter with them. Mythal is all about justice and revenge, but these are reactionary positions. Considering when she reveals herself to Morrigan, she even forgives Morrigan for not understanding and sending the hero Ferelden to kill her when we understood Mythal to be just Flemeth, the Witch of the Wilds. To me, there are not many other avenues where Mythal would actually be withholding power to the other Evanuris. Her sin against her peers was treating the dwarves and titans fairly, or like actual people. That's where I'm
Can't do
thinking.
that.
In my one shot, it's implied that the dwarves whose titan is murdered for Lyrium blame Mythal for the murder. She is the one who called the meeting, and the dwarves would be ignorant of her true intentions. However, someone who was there serving beside her wouldn't be. Someone like Solus. My hope is that in Dragon Age 4 we find out what this betrayal is through Solus's actions. There's a lot of focus on Solus coming back. Makes sense considering Trespasser revealed him to be the true antagonist Inquisition like we spoke about earlier. However, I have a feeling Mythal is going to come back in one form or another as another additional antagonist. If previous Dragon Age antagonists have taught us anything, it's that keeping a narrow view allows you to be manipulated. Solus is in danger of having that narrow view. It's the perfect chance for Mythal to reveal one of the many tricks up her sleeve. So that's my main theory and premise with this lore, is that...
If she does come back, I hope she's still played by Kate Mulgrew.
Oh, she better be played by Kate Mulgrew, by the way. Mad respect for that voice acting game. But that's my main theory, is just with these two things, and this idea that Mythal was betrayed because the Evanuris want to pursue power, but yet there's this idea that she's the reason that the Titans fell. I mean, unless she was so evil that she was hoarding all of the Lyrium for herself, which makes no sense to me, because... she was the one that was treated her people well, according to Solus. And Solus, he's a prejudiced guy, but he's prejudiced because he doesn't believe that everything that came after the elves are people. So...
Rolling my eyes. This
Yeah.
is why I never romance him. Also, he's annoying.
Okay, look, I romance him because I love a good tragedy, okay? That's...
Wait a minute.
Not in real life, in my fictional dalliances. You know, Fenris was the same way. That's a you want to talk about a tragedy. Do you really think that you get to love him and then all his issues are fixed? No. That's somebody who needs work. Anyway, so with that being said, I have a feeling that these are going to come back. They're going to be intertwined very deeply, and we're going to find out that Solus, as much as we're playing him up right now, because that was the same thing. So think about it. When you think about the other Dragon Age games, so Inquisition, Corypheus was touted as the main guy, but it was really Solus. In Dragon Age 2, there was this idea of like the main enemies being the Qunari, but then it turned out it was really everybody else's, this civil war of mages.
Which ends up being what 3 is all about.
It ends up being what 3 is all about.
And the first one is all about...
Well, it's supposed to be about the Blight, but really the only reason the Blight's a big issue is because of Logain.
Right.
So there's...
I just thought of something actually, though, too.
Yeah?
We were talking earlier about DLC that goes between both games.
Yeah.
And Anders isn't introduced until Dragon Age
Awakening.
Awakening.
And he's the one who's the catalyst for the last battles.
Because he has justice in him.
Yeah. He's... Yeah. So...
Spoiler, I guess, for all the Dragon Age games there, though.
Yeah. So... My point is...
Retroactive spoiler warning.
Dragon Age tends to do this thing where you have somebody who you think is the clear-cut bad guy in the traditional fantasy game sense.
So you think it's going to be...
And they throw you a curveball. And I think it was really going to be Mythal. Because Mythal has talked about how thoroughly she plans. When we thought Flemeth was just Flemeth, we didn't realize Flemeth was actually part Evanuris. You know, she talks about how thoroughly she plans, how... You know, being killed by Morrigan was just kind of a minor setback. You know, she has these other daughters that have helped her out in history.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and different, certain daughters. Morrigan thinks that Flemeth is an awful manipulator. Vanya obviously is following in her mother's footsteps and thinks that everything given to her from her mother's a gift. So there's a lot of different pathways that she takes. And I don't think Solus, especially not having been originally in Evanuris, as much as he was very powerful enough to lock them away, I don't think she would have just let Solus approach her, take her power, and let that be.
Okay. I can see that.
I have a feeling that she lulled him into a sense of security that he was going to be able to try to reshape the world into what he thinks it should be. Essentially, this whole survivor's guilt of... The survivor's guilt of Solus is basically his prime motivation. Right. So she's going to let him believe that he's running the show. And then literally in the middle of Act 2 or at the end of Act 2, we're going to realize that Mythal was pulling some strings and she's going to come back reincarnated as something else. I mean...
Like a dragon.
You know, or we have to figure out if Kieran has the old god's soul, why does she want it?
Right. Right. I was about to ask that too. I don't know.
Yeah. So I
vaguely remember Kieran because
she's and she's been placed like, for example, like out of nowhere at the beginning of Dragon Age 2, when you think you might have killed her, literally one of your first missions is helping what's her name bring her back as Asha Belinar.
Oh, Meryl?
Yeah, help Meryl bring her back. It's like, oh yeah, this was my contingency plan. Peace.
I vaguely remember that, yeah.
So she's always been this constant presence, but she's kind of always been more of a background character. I have a feeling in Dragon Age 4, we're going to have to see more of what her main plan is. For all we know, it won't even be finished because she wants revenge. Justice and revenge are very closely linked to each other. Justice and vengeance, is the whole story of Anders, the manipulation of the spirit.
Right.
So
that's your theory, huh?
That's my theory, and that's our mini-sode, which I feel like is a little longer than I thought it was going to be.
You get talking about Dragon Age, though.
But I just want to put that out there. I really honestly think that Solus is kind of almost a red herring.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I definitely can.
Because he's so easy to be punchable. Either, some people, as they said in the video, by words, like some people want to make out with him, some people want to punch him, some people want to do both. I'm kind of in the camp that wants to do both. Like, he's got this romantic air about him, but he's also a genocidal maniac.
If you say so.
Well, he's also attractive. Okay, they made him look attractive.
If you say so.
Okay, look.
I can appreciate the attractiveness of characters. Like, Blackwall is attractive.
What? No.
No?
No.
Really?
No.
Kind of has that. He's attractive in the same way that some women would find Thane attractive in Mass Effect.
Yeah, I wasn't attracted to Thane either.
Fair, but like Cullen is attractive.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Iron Bull.
No, Iron Bull's attractive though in a different way.
Iron Bull's attractive because I had a crush on Freddie Prinze Jr. since junior high, and now that's like the only
Alistair's
way.
attractive.
Alistair's definitely attractive. Yeah.
But Solus is like, I don't see the attraction. Like his character model looks good because they all look good.
Yeah, his character
but
model looks good.
he's just like he comes across as just like he doesn't like you unless you're an elf. Which I've never played an elf
So you
inquisitor. Maybe
have
that's
to
part
play.
of it.
You have to play an elf inquisitor because he has such a. He comes with this high regard and respect for the culture, and at the time when you're first getting to know him, you think he's a well-traveled student of elven life. That he's been studying magic. He's been studying ancient traditions, and he's probably one of the most versed in it. But it's kind of like this lonely journey, and through it you're invited to, is if you share that appreciation, especially if you're playing an elven mage because you're a keeper and essentially, or you're like the second to the keeper, so you essentially also have this background of preserving these traditions, and so the two of you kind of can relate on that sense. And also, you both feel like outcasts because suddenly you're put on this Andrastian position as an elven outsider,
Right.
and he's very much an outsider as well. Like, you don't believe in Andraste, but you're kind of like got all these Andrastian followers because you happen to be the Inquisitor. You happen to get some magic on your hand. And suddenly, these people who've been oppressing your people for years, by the way, suddenly want to be your friend? Suddenly want to, like, hang out and be impressed by you, and you're supposed to help decide who the divine's going to be? And all this stuff? It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But,
Okay.
you
All right.
know,
I should just play an elven inquisitor at some point.
we should do it on Twitch just so that way you can like roll your eyes at
my
every
God.
time you romance Solus. Yeah, we should just do it on Twitch.
I don't want to do face cam though.
Okay.
Anyway, that's our mini episode.
That's our mini episode. So thank you so much, patrons, for supporting us and listening early. We appreciate it. And yes, Safi will have other theories and things coming up for Dragon Age as well. And there might even be other full episodes on that.
You're also the one who's going to be doing Fallout stuff. So.
Fallout stuff, though I'm not as like I like Fallout, but it's much more of a passing fancy than Dragon Age is.
You just know more about it than I do. That's all.
I definitely do because there's so many little tiny stories that are really awesome. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
We'll catch you guys next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.